These were my people. Where are they now? Some were to die of broken old age. Some to be lost forever in the desert. Others taken into bondage. But most of them perished in the agony of their mountain land, slain and scattered to desert winds by the official commands of a government. And a nation nearly perished in the greatest mass martyrdom the world had ever seen. Survivors of the Turkish massacres of 1915 were forced to flee to many parts of the world. She came to America as an orphan girl, growing into womanhood to become parent and grandparent, in her time to continue her lost heritage. Her entire family was massacred. She alone survived. Family after family was destroyed, deliberately, systematically, until the Armenian nation was almost eliminated from the face of the earth. Her ancestors came from a Middle Eastern plateau between Europe and Asia, Russia and Arabia. It was a stern and beautiful mountain land of great challenge. Legends claim that Noah's Ark came to rest on Mount Ararat in the Caucasus Mountains. 1,000 years before Christ, the Armenians settled around the base of this towering peak. Shepherds grazed their flocks in the upland valleys. On the plateau, they erected Armenian kingdoms and designed their coats of arms. Armenia had her birth on the battlefield, for she stood at the crossroads of the world. The empire builders, Assyria and Parthia, Rome and Persia, fought each other over the body of Armenia. The first period of Armenian history was the pagan era, which lasted over 1,000 years, from 700 BC to 301 AD. During these centuries, she became a buffer between East and West, learning from both and producing an enduring culture. In the 1st century BC, during the reign of King Dikran the Great, Armenia rose to her greatest power and territorial extent and became the dominant state of the Middle East. Dikran ruled over a mighty empire of over 25 million people. His power extended from the Caucasus to the edge of the Arabian Desert, from the Mediterranean to the Caspian Sea. History lives but dimly through the memory of man. Our search for the story of the millions of people who have lived on the Armenian tableland is rewarded in many libraries and monasteries throughout the ancient world. Here we find the records of a people who dared face overwhelming odds, to cling to their soil, to their creed and their language, and yet survive. In manuscripts, we read of the second era of Armenian history, the Christian, beginning in the 4th century. During this period, the Armenian language, which had been in continuous use for over 1,000 years, received an alphabet. Scholars were sent to all parts of the world. After 30 years of study, a written phonetic alphabet, including most basic sounds, was evolved. The new alphabet worked a miracle. The language blossomed, and the nation was united spiritually. These were the golden centuries. By the acceptance of Christianity in 301 AD, Armenia became the first Christian nation. An Armenian church, distinct from the Greek Orthodox and Roman Catholic, was established under the leadership of Gregory the Illuminator. The Persian king commanded Armenia to give up Christianity, but the Armenians refused to revert their faith back to fire-worshipping Zoroastrianism. On the field of Avarar, near the present Turco-Iranian border, the armies gathered their forces. Vartan, commander of all the Armenians, stood under the cross of Christ. While his soldiers watched, a pagan urn of fire was cast down at the foot of their leader. The Persians outnumbered the Armenians almost 6 to 1. Powerful elephants faced Vartan's army of foot soldiers. Before the sun had set, the black soil of Avarai had seen the world's first great battle for religious freedom and the preservation of the Christian faith. In losing the battle, the Armenians preserved their nation. The Persians won a territorial war, but failed in their effort to eradicate the Christian faith, which continued to be the dominant influence in Armenian life. For centuries, Vartan's tomb has stood on the barren Anatolian plain, a monument to the victory of faith over force. For the next 1,500 years, the church became the backbone of national life. Through literature and art, her scholars enriched a culture that unified the people. Armenian miniatures, painted in the monasteries of the Middle Ages, depict the story of Christ's life from birth through crucifixion to resurrection. Christ's 33 years on earth are compared symbolically with the 3,300-year history of the Armenian people. As Christ arose, so would arise the Armenian nation. This was the belief of the artist. The national revival continued in sculpture and architecture. During the early Middle Ages, thousands of churches were built in Armenia. As scholars and artists labored, the centuries slipped by. 600 years, twice the lifespan of most world empires. During this era, Armenia continued to fight in the cause of Christendom. In the 11th century, Ani, the shining capital of Armenia, was destroyed by the Seljuk Turks. A city of 1,001 churches was demolished by the conquerors. She stands today in immense solitude, with wounds and scars inflicted in the death agonies of her martyrdom. In empty sanctuaries echo the voices of the Armenian nobility who died in battle. As an ancient document proudly proclaims, "From this belief none can move us, neither angels nor men, neither fire nor sword. We should die as mortals, that we may accept our death as that of immortals." With the fall of Ani came an end to the independence of Greater Armenia. The onslaught of the Tartars toward Europe now passed through the Armenian plateau and divided the land. Armenians were driven southward, where they established the flourishing independent kingdom of Lesser Armenia, or Cilician Armenia, on the shores of the Mediterranean. The Armenians welcomed and aided the First Crusade by Godfrey de Bouillon, which arrived in Cilicia in 1097. Powerful Armenian kingdoms continued to enrich the culture of the people through constant association with Asia and Europe. On April 13th, 1375, after 300 years of constant warfare, the kingdom of Cilician Armenia fell to the Muslim forces. King Levon V, driven from his throne, went to Europe to plead the cause of his people. He died in Paris after many unsuccessful efforts to unite the English and the French against the common enemy in the East. Thus passed from existence the last Armenian kingdom, and the long night of oppression began under the Ottoman Turks. But the dream of an independent Armenia never died through the continual struggle for survival during the next 500 years. The Ottoman Empire sat upon the peaks of Armenia as a giant octopus, but creed, language, and the deathless will to live kept together the Armenian community. In springtime, the apricot trees flowered on remote hill slopes. In the fall, Armenian maidens gathered the fruit of the vine. A zest for life and happiness prevailed. Research centers, such as at Harvard and UCLA, enable us to probe with scholarship into the authentic records and manuscripts of the last era of Armenian history. The way to exterminate the memory of a race is to destroy its books. Books on Armenian history were prohibited by the sultans. For decades, living under persecution and oppression was the normal way of life. History reveals that as the Ottoman Empire declined, oppression of her Christian minorities became more severe. During the First World War, the American ambassador to Turkey, Henry Morgenthau, British jurist Lord Bryce, and historian Arnold J. Toynbee authenticated the final martyrdom of the Armenian people. The Turkish government decided to rid itself of the Armenians through planned extermination, through total genocide. The Ottoman government feared that the Western powers would in time force them to grant independence to the Armenians. Thus, Turkey would lose some of the most important parts of its empire. While the world's attention was diverted by the First World War, Turkish authorities felt they could act with greater boldness. There was a definite scheme. The plan of the massacres was deliberate extermination. Talat Pasha, the Minister of Interior, Enver Pasha, Minister of War, and Cemal Bey issued the secret orders for atrocities, which read, "Government has decided to destroy completely all the Armenians living in Turkey. All Armenians from 5 years of age upward are to be taken out of the towns and slaughtered." All was done by the will of the government. Carefully, premeditated, and systematically carried out, unsuspected by the Armenians. Suddenly, during the night of April 24th, 1915, the Armenian intellectuals, professors, writers, doctors, business leaders, and clergy were taken away for execution. The Armenians in the army were killed at the same time. Once peaceful and prosperous Armenian towns were pillaged, plundered, and depopulated. The Turkish crowds were incited against the Armenians. Religious fanaticism was aroused against them in order to attain the political and economic goals of the government. The Christians were gathered from their homes and herded outside the towns. A forced deportation to the sea started. One caravan of Armenians, deported from the city of Kharpert alone, numbered 5,000. Within a few miles of town, they were slaughtered and robbed. Under the pretext of relocating them during the war, the Turkish government marched the Armenians to the waterless Arabian deserts. Over silent slopes, into the burning, tortured wastelands, the Armenian nation was driven. Within a year, Turkey hoped to solve forever the Armenian question and silence their demands for freedom from oppression. The most prosperous and advanced of all the peoples in Turkey became the starving Armenians. None of them ever returned to their homes. They were led over circuitous routes to die, never to reach their destination, the ocean shores. The Armenian roots were to be dug up as those of a tree, and the Armenian question was to be settled before awakened world opinion could be mobilized. Eyewitnesses documented and sketched the horrors in city after city. Almost 1.5 million Armenians perished by massacre or death through forced starvation. Few escaped. Out of a population of over 2 million, there remained after the war less than 100,000 within the Turkish Empire. In addition to loss of life and the loss of their ancestral homeland, the Armenians suffered several $billion in damage to homes, farms, and goods confiscated without compensation. Many Armenian girls were forced into Turkish harems. "Where are my people?" asks the shepherd boy of Ararat. "They have left their flock to the enemy. They clung to their faith and lost their life." Where are my people? They were slain by the will of a government. They died on desert plain and mountain land. Throughout the world, on April 24th of each year, the Armenians meet to partake of Requiem Mass for their lost families. The patriarch, who together with his flock fled to safety in Arab lands, cried out, "The world has never seen anything like it." An Armenian prophet asked, "Who can foretell our future?" The poets sang, "The desert sands and rocky crags may yet yield a new generation and a new resurrection. The texture of her garment will change, but Armenia will rise again and again from the ashes of the Anatolian plain." Armenians in America and Europe had gone as volunteers during the First World War. Woodrow Wilson proposed autonomy for Armenia under American sponsorship. This dream collapsed in the U.S. Senate. From the desert and the mountains, the orphans were gathered and placed in tent cities by European and American relief committees. The miracle of Armenian survival was at work. By starving children, the race was to be preserved. Fate had chosen them to perpetuate the heritage of their people. These were the children found in one day's search across the desert wastes. Others survived to bear a secret sorrow. A once proud people reduced to scavenging along the ocean front. A girl blinded by atrocities, caressing a braille map of the homeland. A grandfather who has lost his entire family, searching in the Bible with faith unshaken for an answer. A boy who lost all, forgetting his loneliness for a moment in the music of his people. On April 24th, in lands near and distant from Mount Ararat, it is a familiar sight to witness the pilgrimage to commemorate the great martyrdom. On hills such as this, near Musadach in ancient Cilicia, thousands of Armenians were massacred. That which happened to the Armenians during the First World War has happened to others since. It could happen again, today or tomorrow. The pages of history recount the tortured fate of vanquished peoples. Reading them, who can resurrect the life they led? Who can truly feel the horror of their deaths? New generations cannot understand the injustices of yesteryear, yet the older generations remain silent as new crimes are committed against humanity.